Were Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire really that good, or are they just overrated? These remakes brought a lot to the table and included a lot of quality of life changes from the DS era and 3DS era, and felt like an entirely new imagining of this generation of Pokemon. These are remakes of the beloved games Ruby and Sapphire, which originally released in Japan on November 21st, 2002, North America on March 19th, 2003, Australia on April 3rd, 2003, and Europe July 25th, 2003. These games introduced the Hoenn region, and like every new generation of Pokemon, offered a bunch of new Pokemon, new mechanics like double battles, and the addition of abilities to the game. These games are favorites of many Pokemon fans and did a lot to take the series to the heights that it's in today. But as time went on, more and more games came out in the series, and the quality of life changes kept coming, leaving these games to feel outdated to some when compared to the modern titles. Don't get me wrong, these are still some of my favorite Pokemon games of all time, but there are things in these games that were missing that was added to modern titles that are just so nice to have. Fast forward to 2014, and Game Freak did what it did best and remade their games to put older titles onto newer hardware and gave us Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which released on November 21st, 2014 worldwide, except for Europe, which released on November 28th, 2014. These remakes brought Hoenn into the modern era with enhanced graphics, updated mechanics, and even some new content. This is one of the best remakes that Pokemon has ever made and is by far better than what we've gotten recently.
Leave us alone! No way, you're gonna take it!
From the moment you start this game, the difference is night and day. The Hoenn region is brought to life with the new 3D graphics, and the overall aesthetic is much more modern than the original games. I'm personally a fan of the sprite art style, but these games did a really good job of bringing the Hoenn region to life. Just like the originals, you're brought to Hoenn pressed between an ottoman and a refrigerator in the back of a U-Haul truck. They do a great job of beating you with nostalgia right off the bat, showing the original graphic art style of Professor Birch telling you about the world of Pokemon right away. It's things like that that make this game so special. It did a great job of combining new features and styles of the modern games with the nostalgic callbacks of the older games. One of the most important parts of any remake is how they navigate adding improvements to the formula and balancing those changes with the original features. And Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire did an incredible job at adding new things that melded into the formula seamlessly. The first new feature was the Dex Nav, and it was great. It made it so much easier to capture and encounter Pokemon. Sneaking over to the piece of grass where the Pokemon is thrilling, and it made it so much easier to track Pokemon locations and find Pokemon with hidden abilities and moves. And it made completing the Pokedex so much more digestible. Another huge change was to the graphics and the movement. They completely remade the Hoenn region, and it looks brand new. Exploring the world was smoother than ever, and it added new ways to traverse the land, which we'll touch on in a minute. The updated visuals made every town, route, and cave look stunning. The biggest issue I had was the Pokemon models were a little bit of a letdown because of how good they looked in Gen 5 and how they lack personality with the jump to 3D models. But I can't blame this game entirely because this was also the case in X and Y. The Pokemon look fine, but they seem boring when you compare them to how much flair they had in 2D. They don't look bad, it was just a big evolution from what it used to be. Speaking of big evolutions, Mega Evolutions from X and Y were brought over to these games, and the feature was added really well into Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Mega Evolutions have always been a fan favorite, and they added a great level of strategy to battles in this game. They added new Mega Evolutions to fan favorite Pokemon, including the 3 starters, with Blaziken, Swampert, and Sceptile all receiving their own Mega Evolutions. I love Mega Evolutions, but some look better than others. Here's Mega Latios and Latios. Can you tell which is which?
I know it, they're both Spindas.
The game integrates Megas into the story really well, which is nice, but the game does suffer for some issues about how easy it's made through the story. At a certain point in the story, they just give you Latios or Latios, which are legendaries who can Mega Evolve for free. Getting handed a legendary is fine, but have it happen after the main story is completed. You don't have to use it, but getting it handed to you just makes it too easy. The only thing that makes this better than the originals is that I don't have to chase down Latios and Latios for 45 minutes. During the story, you still try and fight either Team Magma or Team Aqua depending on your version, and try and ruin their plans to make huge changes to the world. All in all, the stories are just as good as the originals. The best part of the story, though, happens after the main story concludes, and it's the Delta episode. This is a post-game storyline, which is a whole new adventure involving Rayquaza and Deoxys, which is incredible. Your mission is to summon Rayquaza and destroy a meteorite, which is an extremely fun but simple story. The Delta episode was great, and it gave fans of the older games a short story that paid homage to Pokemon Emerald really well. Getting to ride Rayquaza into space to fight Deoxys was awesome, and something I didn't think they would add to a mainline Pokemon game outside of an event.
Why does this get me going a bit?
Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire also improved on a bunch of other features in the original game. Secret bases made a return, allowing people to make their own little personal hideouts, and added a lot of customization options that weren't in the original. They also added connectivity to Street Pass so you can see your friends' bases. I never really used this feature myself, but it was great for people who like to make their own little Pokemon forts. Pokemon contests received a huge overhaul as well, with new moves and features that made them more engaging than ever. Players could show off their Pokemon, and it was a really fun way to add a little minigame into this game. It's great that they added something that was so popular in the anime to the base games. And one of the biggest quality of life jumps that I don't hear people talk about is the player search system. Using the internet, you can connect and trade with people across the world, and using features like Wonder Trade made every playthrough have the option to be something really interesting. It made completing the Pokédex so much easier, and even aided with things like shiny hunting if you got a foreign Pokemon. The most interesting changes though were the changes to traversal. Soaring through the skies in the backs of Latios and Latios was a great addition to this game. You can literally fly anywhere in the region on the back of these Pokemon, and it is surreal to get to see the region from this angle. This is the best flight feature in any modern Pokemon game. This feature allowed players to explore the skies of the Hoenn region, discovering hidden areas, and later in the game encountering legendary Pokemon. It was a great way to explore the region and added a sense of wonder to the game. While not as big, surfing also got an overhaul, where if you surf on a Sharpedo or Kyogre, you get to see them in the water, and it's really nice to see. Riding on Sharpedo made you surf extremely fast, which is something that was great because one of the main problems of this game is having so much water. Having faster movement in the water and being able to move in a less linear pattern makes this game so much more approachable. For a lot of fans, these games struck a great balance between nostalgia and new experiences. The remakes kept the formula and spirit of the originals while introducing enough new content to keep returning players engaged. Battling gym leaders, facing off against Team Magma and Team Aqua, and exploring the modern versions of iconic areas like Zootopolis and the Seafloor Cavern felt awesome and nostalgic. New features like Mirage Spots where you could find legendary Pokemon added enough to make these games feel like a new experience, all while retaining the charm of the originals. These new additions kept the experience exciting and unpredictable in a game that many fans have played through countless times. But with all the good, there are still things this game could have done better. One of the biggest disappointments was there was no Battle Frontier from Emerald. Instead, we got the Battle Resort, which, while enjoyable, didn't quite capture the same level of challenge. The Battle Frontier was iconic to both the games and the anime, and even though the Battle Resort was fun, I wish they added something more substantial to the post-game to keep me playing even longer. They had a great template already planned out for the Battle Frontier with Emerald, so seeing a modern take on that would have been awesome. One thing they didn't really improve either was the pacing. The story takes a while to get going in the originals and the remakes. I wish they added more encounters with Team Magma and Aqua earlier in the story. Sure, there are some early encounters, but until a few hours into the game, you only see Team Magma and Aqua a couple times in the story. I wish they added more Magma and Aqua grunts in the background of various locations. Even if you couldn't battle them, it'd be a great way to get them more involved in the story without changing anything. But these are just small issues. These games offer loads of content that'll keep you playing for hours and hours. The only other remake that compares to this game is Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which is the biggest compliment you can get with being a Pokemon remake. Both games did an incredible job of taking an older region and bringing it onto modern hardware with new quality of life features. Ultimately, both games are great, and it depends on what generation you prefer. So were Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire really that good? Absolutely. These games managed to capture the magic of the original games while adding enough new content and improvements to make them stand on their own. From the recreation of the Hoenn region with updated graphics to engaging new features and nostalgic moments, these games are a must-play for any Pokemon fan. If you haven't checked them out and you're looking for a game to play, I highly recommend this. If you made it this far in the video, I wanted to say thank you for watching. I hope that you and your family have an incredible rest of your day, and if you like anything you saw here, please consider subscribing.